Good morning. It's September 26, 2023. It's a Tuesday and it's sunshiny morning here in Capitolio, Pasig. And I do hope that the same is happening in your part of the world or part of the country. Welcome to your program agenda. I'm your host, Cito Beltran. Thanking you for watching us on Cignal TV, One News, channels 8 and 250. And of course, thank you for being subscribers of Cignal TV. And of course, thank you also to those of you who catch us via Facebook and YouTube, especially for our replays or for episodes that you're very interested in watching. Thank you also to PLDT for their home fiber optic internet. Talagang maaasahan. Ha? Ako lang po yung gumagawa nun. Hindi po binabasa itong mga sinasabi ko. Anyway, welcome to the show. And please, if you can and if you would, please listen to the show today. Pay particular attention to the conversation because today we are going to tackle a World Bank report on the state of education in East Asia. And it seems that the report is tackling concerns that is also evident or nangyayari sa Pilipinas. So please listen and learn a lot because even as a journalist, I'm learning just from skimming through the summary of the report. And we were hoping to get someone from World Bank directly abroad who did the study, but we will do an analysis with local experts and people who have devoted themselves to education or the improvement of education later in the program. So today, let's start our day with the Daily Starter. And our Daily Starter comes from the management consultant and author, Peter Drucker. Whenever you see a successful business, someone once made a courageous decision. Tandaan niyo po yan. You know, many people think, wow, his business is doing well, her business is doing well, that company is doing so well. And we tend to forget that before that business, that company, or that success story ever happened, someone needed to be brave, needed to be courageous. Sabi nga sa Bible, when the Lord spoke to Joshua 3 times, if I'm not mistaken, take courage, be courageous. Lagi yun ang sinasabi ni Lord, be courageous. When you want to embark on something, whether it's your studies, it's a business, or a venture, you need to make courageous decisions. And if I'm not mistaken, Coelho, the author, also said, travel does not require a lot of money. What it requires is courage. Courage to separate yourself from your comfort zone, courage to leave things behind and to go take a journey. So a lot of stuff in life requires courageous decision. So I hope you learn from today's Daily Starter. Anyway, let's go to the front page of the Philippine Star today, September 26, 2023, Tuesday, and the headline is Philippine Coast Guard cuts through China Sea Barrier. Okay, there's that photo there. The Philippine Coast Guard has started removing the floating barrier that Chinese maritime authorities installed to block access to the disputed Panatag or Scarborough Shoal. At the top of that story, you have a item, EU says barriers disregard UNCLOS or United Nations Law of the Seas. Okay, so yan po, there's a photo of the Coast Guard divers cutting the rope that was anchoring the floating barriers put up by the Chinese Coast Guard. Meanwhile, at the top of the front page, the header, which actually is the main story right now in social media, Office of the Vice President spent 125 million confidential funds in 11 days. Okay? Yan po ang pinag-uusapan and has become a serious issue and point of inquiry and criticism on how you can spend 125 million pesos in 11 days. Kailangan mo talagang bill me, ha? Bili mo ko, okay? Anyway, below that story, we have features of Filipino athletes who are competing in the Asian Games at the moment, and focus is on a 9-year-old. So fun, says Philippines' 9-year-old athlete in Asian Games. She probably ought to have been in primary school, but instead, Mazel Paris Alegado, age 9, competed in skateboarding at the Asian Games on Monday. Meanwhile, we have a photo of Alex Ayala in action against Pakistan's Sara Ibrahim Khan in the women's single. Ayala won the match 6-0, 6-0. And Jones Liabres Inso claimed the Philippines' second medal of the games when he won bronze in the wushu men's Taijikan and Taijilian all around yesterday. So yan po, it's nice to see young people competing on behalf of the Philippines at hindi po yung mga thunders na or ika nga mataas na ang uric acid. Okay. Meanwhile, the Commission on Election, DOJ joined forces versus BSKE vote buying. Okay, the Department of Justice and the COMELEC have signed a memorandum for the Contra Bigay program aimed at combating vote buying and selling not only in the barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections, but also in future elections. Okay. Meanwhile, Speaker Martin Romualdez of the House of Representatives to Chief Airport Screener or Head of the Airport Security, yung Transport Authority ba yun? Quit ASAP. Yan po, aray ko. Pinagre-resign na siya. The head of the Office for Transport Security should have the delicadeza to resign amid the cases of alleged theft involving OTS screeners at the NAIA. Speaker Martin Romualdez said yesterday. Ayan po, no? Medyo nadadalas ang mga pronouncements ni Speaker yung pong suspension of the excise tax. 1 week na, wala pang balita. Let's hope it happens. Anyway, Senators Tuneda and Philippine Statistics Authority, where's our national ID? Parang yung commercial noon ng isang burger chain, no? Where's the beef? Where is the national ID? This was the question posed by some senators to officials of the NEDA and the PSA during the Senate public hearing on the agency's proposed budget. Okay. Meanwhile, there will be slight price rollback ends week of hikes. It is so slight, you won't even notice it or didn't hear much about it. After consecutive weeks of increases totaling to 17 pesos 30 for diesel and 11.85 for gasoline, today there is an advisory that there will be a reduction of 20 centavos per liter for both gasoline and diesel, and 50 centavos for kerosene. Hinold ko pa yung breath, ano? Pigil hininga. 20 centimos ang binawas. Pero ang tinaas, 17.30. So, ang mas mataas pa rin by 17 pesos and 10 centavos. Ano lang naman yun? Ilang linggo lang naman yung sunod-sunod na pagtaas na yun. Okay. Meanwhile, bottom photo, recipients of the 11th Property Guru Philippine Property Awards posed with organizers and guests during the gala celebration. Yan yung mga magagaling sa real estate. Okay. Meanwhile, palace to public, keep masks on. Yan na po yung sinasabi natin kahapon, that in spite of pronouncements or announcements that the air quality has improved, that the smog has dissipated, we are living in a pollution-generating environment in Metro Manila. Therefore, you must wear your masks. Okay, so ayan na. I think that's all the news we have. And we will go for a quick break. When we return, we go to the subject matter for today. And no, you cannot have recess. You cannot go to the toilet. Teacher, we'll be right back here on Agenda.
A lot of middle-income countries in East Asia and Pacific region are struggling to achieve high teaching quality. This includes the Philippines. According to the recent report of the World Bank, these countries have education systems that are unattractive to those who would be best teachers. The teaching capacity in these areas are classified as weak, and the behavior of teachers are not supportive of student learning. The study explained that educators in the region are not motivated to teach because of relatively low salaries and poor working conditions. Moreover, a lot of teachers have not mastered the content they are expected to teach. How can we solve these challenges in the country? Let's further discuss this on today's agenda.
Justine Raagas is the Executive Director of Philippine Business for Education. PBED is a non-profit organization advocating inclusive education for a better national development. Raagas has 9 years of experience in education reform and policy advocacy centered on youth employability.
Hello, good morning.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Good morning. Welcome back to the program, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, the reason we're focusing on education yet again is because I happened to come across a World Bank study that was making assessment on problems, good and bad, regarding education in different parts of the world, particularly in East Asia, and with highlights on Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And, most of the time in the past months, we've been focusing on the students. But this study is focusing on the teachers, and they are essentially pointing out that the end result, the final quality of education of students, all begins and ends with teachers. Have you read the report?
Yes.
Okay, could you share your views on what you saw, what you read? I just read the summary, and the summary alone was quite disturbing for me.
So essentially teachers are the biggest inputs to learning in the classroom. So it does make sense what the report is saying, that um, learning poverty or our problems in learning, one of the biggest culprits to this is really, of the high learning poverty rate in the country, is really the quality of teaching, or the quality of teachers in the classroom. And I guess there were many reasons, or to digging in deeper into the reasons on poor teaching quality. There were many reasons, and this was cited earlier in the video preceding this interview, right? There is a lack of attraction, I guess, in to those who want to become teachers. In terms of teaching capacity, there are measurements saying that their knowledge and teaching practices are weak, and we still need to improve on teaching practices as well as teaching behaviors. But maybe a good thing to talk about also is, what are the factors, or what are the how the system has really contributed to the quality of teachers that we have now. Because also what we're seeing in many of our conversations with teachers is that they're really also a victim of a very dysfunctional system. And if we want to address teachers, we also really need to address the way we train them, we teach them, we support them in the classrooms as well.
Earlier, because our executive producer, Gab Malyari, is also a teacher, actually. And we were talking about this topic before the show started. And we touched on the issue of critical thinking. We touched on the issue of teacher ed, the course itself, the course of education. And Gab was saying that it starts and ends there. If the course, curriculum, and the education program to create teachers is of low quality or poor, then of course the outcomes which simply has a multiplier effect. Now, what are the teachers telling you, or what has PBED seen on the ground that confirms the study of the World Bank?
So actually, pre-service is a very important and I guess integral part in the quality of teachers, right? Because they really start there, preparing teachers to become effective in the classroom. Really starts in pre-education, or when they are still studying to become teachers. Now, one of the problems that teacher pre-service, kasi you have multiple agencies looking at teacher education. So of course you have DepEd, that's the biggest employer, right? And as employers, they're supposed to provide the signals, what competencies are needed, what skills are needed. But then you have another agency looking at the curriculum, or how teachers are trained, and that's the Commission on Higher Education. So this they're in charge of making sure that the curriculum makes sense, the curriculum is responsive to the actual needs of the workplace. And then in the middle of all of that, you have a gatekeeper, which is the PRC, which tests. So you have three different agencies, all have different languages. So it's very important for them to be talking. And in fact, um, that problem was something that was brought about many years ago, and now very recently the Teacher Education Council was recently passed into law, and then that's really making sure that these agencies talk, these agencies align, and then they make sure that pre-service education is really aligned to the needs within service.
How is that happening, Big Justin? Because in government, unless they're talking about money, budgets, and funds, laws don't help. We
Yes.
have so many laws in the Philippines, but many of them are not implemented. But the minute they have to report to Congress what they will do and what they have done with the money so they can get more, that's the only time something happens. So what's been happening with these three bodies that you mentioned?
So there is something called the Teacher Education Council, which fairly recently we're seeing that being convened. So their role is really to sit down on the table and really discuss, like really look at the whole teacher pathway and preparing teachers so that
Mhm.
we address the problems of curriculum mismatch, skills mismatch, also addressing the problem or the questions as to whether are we testing right? Is the licensure exam actually testing what's being needed in the classrooms? And they
Yeah,
really,
but how does it go? Pasensya na, Justin. Please be patient with me. But how do they go about it? Because common sense in the private sector, it all begins with the customer, with the client.
correct,
So in this case, the client would be the DepEd
would be the
uh,
DepEd and would be the schools, right?
and the
Because
school. So it would be the DepEd and the schools who should formulate the profile,
correct
the curriculum
competencies.
require competency. Yeah.
Mm-mm. So um, basically, there is a profile or a competency. It's called the professional standards for teachers. It's really a list of the competencies that are required. For example, for a beginning teacher, if a teacher progresses through the systems, these are also the skill sets that are necessary. So
Mhm.
basically, that then through the council gets communicated, and then within the of course, within CHED, you have something called the technical panel. This is a group of experts that sit and design or look at the curriculum. Ideally, what they should do in these conversations is to look at the customer's needs, right, and make sure that it gets implemented in the curriculum.
Mhm. Yeah, but is it happening? Because based on the World Bank study, it may not be in the Philippines. I'm not sure. Okay, I won't generalize, but in parts that they studied, teacher competency in certain tracks or subjects were not good. I'm guessing that in the Philippines, the two areas that are suffering now would be mathematics, science, and English.
So I guess that has been a problem in the past, and that's why we have poor content knowledge of teachers. And maybe just to take also a step back, PBED did a licensure exam study. We did a study of the results of the teacher licensure exam across years, close to
Mhm.
more than a decade. And what we saw is that we had really low passing rates in the licensure exam. And this was already from individuals who graduated from teacher education courses. So there have been problems, there has been skills mismatch in the past. But as I shared, there is this new council that was recently and passed into law. And then what we're hopeful actually that now that they're sitting, they will have these conversations and they align curriculum so that hopefully in the future we will have less issues about content knowledge. We will have less issues about poor skills of teachers.
Okay, well, having all that is going to benefit us perhaps after 5 years.
Yeah.
Because if they just met this year, they're submitting developing the curriculum, assuming they're working and they're not slow pokes. they would have something after 1 more year. So chances are the graduates who benefit from this would be 6 years from now, 5 or 6 years. But in the meantime, the World Bank study said that there are three ways to address the teacher competency or the standard of teachers. First was selection. And according to the study, it's too late. Too late to consider selection, so which is 30% of the process. So now it has to be regarding capacity building and motivation of teachers. So capacity training, etc., and then incentivizing and honoring, praising, etc. So what is going on?
Okay, so maybe just to go back to your point on the teacher education and alignment of curriculum and that being a long game, just all to say that we're happy that it's moving because education reform is really a long game, right? So while that's happening, in parallel, correct, there has to be ways to address teacher quality in service, because the study also says that more than 75% of teachers expected to be employed by 2030 are already in the workforce, meaning we have to make do with what we currently have now, and we need to improve the teachers in the system. So first, of course, like as shared, selection, but there will still be teachers entering the system, of course. So we need to beef up, or we also need to make sure that our selection process for that small percentage entering the system is rigorous, it's competitive, it's also based on meritocracy, right? Making sure that the process is learning focused.
Yeah. Justin, meritocracy, you mentioned that, okay. And earlier you mentioned that there are three players. There's DepEd, CHED, and the Professional Regulatory Commission. Now, as far as the PRC is concerned, are they doing a good job of screening the competence from the incompetent or qualified from the unqualified? Because it's one thing to memorize all the right answers and pass, and it's different to take a test that determines whether you really know what you're supposed to be doing.
Correct. Actually, we have also been calling for reviews of the test because for the longest time, it hasn't been open to the public. It's very important to actually check if we are checking correctly, right? Like there has to be some way to evaluate if we are correctly screening. But in many other contexts as well, there are many factors that can affect test taking. There are people who are really good but might have had a bad day and then do not do well in tests, right? So in other contexts, or in other countries, for example, there are multiple ways to check for quality of teaching. It can be if they come from a really good school, from a really rigorous system, that's enough to measure how good they can be as a teacher. Sometimes it's also based on their portfolio, their previous experience, etc. So in as to whether so back to your question on the test, we really want to make sure that it gets looked at, and then we can then say if the test is correctly measuring, or if we need another way to measure readiness for teaching.
Okay, are there any available alternatives, or are there groups that have conducted, like for the private schools, do they have a different set of testing systems that are better than the PRC, for instance?
So I think now this is really the test that is required, because for you to get into DepEd, for example, you have to be for you to have an item, you have to be a passer of the licensure exam.
Yeah.
Some private schools do not require that. So basically, they normally screen based on other factors, such as maybe how they present themselves, how they do like practice teaching, or how they do like test teaching when they do interviews. Also grades, portfolio. These are other things that they look at.
Yeah, because I won't tell you I can't say the name of the person, but I know someone who graduated mass comm. His passion was to teach, or he got interested in teaching. So he got training, special training, and passed the licensure exam. Now, I know he's a smart kid, but he didn't start out in life wanting to be a teacher. It just happened. And, it's different when you've invested so many years in a craft versus doing it later in life. Now that's my point. It's like, so up to now we have no way of independently determining the quality of teachers in the Philippines by way of tests.
So so what we're actually looking forward, and I guess you know that the EDCOM, or the Congressional Commission on Education, is currently happening, right? And that's one of the biggest things they're looking at also, like teacher quality, how we're preparing them in service. We're also looking forward to hopefully a review of the test and a review of the pre-service system in general,
Mhm.
and how we're measuring readiness, propensity for teaching, and all these things.
Okay, now all of these things are supposed to create the CHED, the DepEd, and the PRC put together. The Teachers Education Council are supposed to create result in better teachers. But uh, when faced with 40, 50, 60 kids in the classroom, what does the PBED say in terms of effectivity? Kasi medyo, yun nga lang 5 anak, nasisira na ang ulo eh. Ano pa yung 60 ang asikasuin mo araw-araw?
No, actually, Sito, that's why I also mentioned that they are really victims of the system. So, for example, in the World Bank, what the report also says that they have to go. So those in the system really need to be supported with like well implemented teacher training programs, right? They have to
Mhm.
continue to have training, but how can a teacher focus on getting professional development when they have to deal with 50 students at a time in the classroom? Or how can a teacher focus on professional development when, on top of teaching, they have administrative tasks? They're burdened with, they teach about 6 hours a day in the classroom. They're given
Mhm.
about 2 hours to do administrative tasks, but the documents, anecdotally, and when we talk to teachers on the ground, the administrative tasks actually take up more time than teaching. So that all of these things kind of put the professional development and training in the back burner because they're just faced with so many problems in the classroom.
Yeah, and
But all to say, we
yeah,
need
go
to
ahead.
change that.
You were saying?
But all to say, we need to change that system, and we need to give teachers more time, more support, so that they can, upgrade, reskill, continue with professional development, so that they can have, better content knowledge, and then better capacities in the classroom.
Okay, let's go for a quick break, Justin. And when we come back, I'd like to get the inputs of PBED on what can be done, because an international study is a study. It just calls our attention to primarily what we already know. What are the solutions that are doable in the Philippines that even the teachers recognize? We'll be right back here on Agenda.
Strengthening the quality and effectiveness of teaching in the region will require action on three fronts, according to the World Bank East Asia and Pacific Regional Report. First, attracting and selecting more effective teachers. The report said that high-performing education systems in East Asia and Pacific have been effective in making teaching both attractive and selective through a combination of mechanisms. Second, enhancing teachers' capacity to teach. This can be done through training to enhance teachers' knowledge and skills, and through tools that have been shown to be effective in improving student learning. Third, encouraging greater teacher effort. Teachers need to be present in the classroom and use their knowledge and the tools to help students learn. In principle, several types of incentives could motivate teachers to perform effectively, including professional advancement and financial incentives, among others. Will this prove to be effective as well if done in the Philippines? Let's discuss this further on today's agenda.
Okay, welcome back. And with us is Justine Raagas of PBED, Philippine Business for Education. And Justin, I don't know, things just keep popping out of the woodwork. I have to ask this, you might say, kailangan ba i-memorize yan? But is this country, our country, and our many governments, are we really serious about education in the Philippines? Are we really invested in the proper education of Filipinos? Or is it all a deal for politicians to have money out of construction, infrastructure, courting teachers to get favors during the election? Sincero ba? Are we sincere as a nation and government in educating our children?
I would like to think at this time, yes, the alarms for the learning crisis, I think, really made that push to improve our education system. And I guess this can be seen in the recent movements with the Congressional Commission, the EDCOM too. This is what we've been pushing for the longest time, and what we're saying is our once in a lifetime chance to really review and fix the entire system. So you do have many people in the government who are sincerely looking at the problem, who are spending days, weeks, months doing consultations, just really looking at what we can improve and doing a lot of research and legwork to get there. However, of course, it can be very frustrating because changes in the system really take a long time. So the products, for example, of the EDCOM that we will see now will be policies, and the effects of these policies won't be in the next few years, right? So it can be frustrating to wait, but I guess personally I'm hopeful. But maybe that's also because
Yeah, I
I'm
mean, it's
development.
different. Yeah, I know. It's your passion. It's your, it's your vocation. But stepping back, you really believe that this country and its leaders are invested in education? It's not, education for politics, education for kickbacks, education for money in the local government, because it's so politicized that it's so unfair to focus on teachers when they're essentially, when you look at this conversation, the teachers are victims because they don't control the money, they don't make the policies, they are not the ones in the corridors of power, and here we are talking about teachers.
So I guess in terms of prioritization, there is attention to it now more and more. So we're happy about that. Yes. But what we're seeing is that in comparison to, say, what you mentioned earlier about infrastructures, roads, airports, bridges, tourist campaigns, we still need to invest more. There is prioritization because of the reports, right? Like we needed an international wake-up call. We needed to be at the very bottom of the list. We're seeing problems with investors saying we might not be able to hire talent in the next few years because you don't have enough skills. So, but the question is, why did it have to reach that point for us to now start doing something about it? Um, Also, currently, in terms of expenditure in education, right? Like the global recommended expenditure is 6% of GDP. But right now we're at what, close to 4%. So we really need to put in more money. And if we're investing a lot in infrastructure, shouldn't we also invest in people also first? And therefore add more resources to education so that we can put in these resources to address problems such as what we were talking about earlier, like teachers, more support for teachers, better education for those who would become teachers, better training for those in classroom, more incentives, career progression so that we can take the quality, uplift the quality of teachers, and we can encourage them more as well.
Yeah, because when I was reading the summary, there was a point being made on ed tech. I think I don't know. I don't know what that means. I'm just assuming it means education through technology. Am I correct?
Yep.
Okay, education through technology, but not all the classrooms I've visited as a speaker or just passing by don't have the technology. I mean, I knew of a friend of my one of the barcadas of my daughter who was studying in UP Baguio, and she had to go out of the university campus, out of the campus to get Wi-Fi. You couldn't even buy Wi-Fi inside the university. You had to go outside the university, and this is really, it's insulting to the Filipinos, particularly the children. Anyway, don't get me started, Justin. Medyo
Because
mainit
that's
na
also a
talaga
long
ulo ko.
conversation about infrastructure and technology, right? Maybe all to say that we still have classrooms that do not have electricity. We need to address that, right?
No electricity, and if they have no electricity, they probably have primitive toilets until somebody gets UTI or an entire class starts getting sick, and then the local government will do something about it.
Yes, so we really need, there's really a lot of work to be done in the classrooms and the conditions of the classrooms, not just teachers.
I'm finally going through the report. I'm getting the impression that the developed countries, okay, are also the one who are very invested in education. Take for instance Singapore. People have always said Singapore is not even bigger than Quezon City, and yet it was in the front row of countries that was very invested in education, economically superior to many. And then when I look through all the other countries, it listed down, okay, in our area, China, Singapore, Macau, Hong Kong, Korea, New Zealand, Vietnam, Japan, and Australia, they're all economic boom boomers, and they're also very invested in education. So it's not a choice. We either invest or we stay poor.
Yes, so actually, in the case of Singapore, what was interesting was that when they started as a nation, they really put their foot down and said, we don't have a lot of natural resources. Our resources are our people and our human capital. So we need to invest in education. And how they did that was really making sure that there were resources were coming in, good classrooms. They made sure that their teachers were only the best and the brightest. You had to be top 5 of your class in high school to enter the teaching course or the teaching program. And there's
Wow.
only one institution in Singapore that teaches to really ensure quality. So it's a very rigorous selective system because they know that teachers are really the biggest influence to learning in the classroom. So they really started there. And I guess that's also a question of, is that something we can do here? Can we make, while selection now, while as in our conversation earlier, selection is only one part, right? Because many of those who are selected are already, many of the teachers are already in the system and will be there for a long time. But maybe as a solution, a possible solution, we need to also rethink our selection and our training and the way we train teachers, right?
Yeah, you have the ear of the business community. You represent the interests of the business community in not for their profit, but to ensure the continuity of intellect of qualified experts in various fields. What about a specialized university for education? Is that something that PBED would be inclined to do? Because you know the research is saying it's the teachers we have to invest on. So we've been focusing on students, malnutrition. Now everyone is jumping in there, but now the World Bank is saying, teka, good you're feeding your kids and the pregnant girls or women, but hey, the teachers, you need to do something about the teachers.
So we actually have many centers of excellence in the country. Well, not really many. We have a handful of centers of excellence, and these are in multiple regions. But we need more. There are more than 1,000 schools, colleges offering teacher education. Some of those do just okay. Some of those don't do well, and in fact have 0% passing rates in the licensure exam. What we need are more centers of excellences. We need more institutions.
More centers of excellence
For teacher
and
education.
also an attrition. Would you agree? Attrition of teachers who are not qualified, attrition of colleges and schools that have low passing rate. Is the CHED doing that now?
We really need to police these schools. I think we've released the studies before and we've provided this publicly, but I think it takes a lot of. It's a very complicated process to close down poor performing schools. So it's also something very political, but I hope that's something that they can also look at.
Okay.
But we really need to make sure that we keep and we support these really good schools. And actually, these good schools can also take in sister schools, right? So maybe just to share like the context in the BARM. This is where you have the lowest learning outcomes of students, but this is also because there are no centers of excellence there. So
Okay.
you have a cycle where you don't have good teachers coming out of good schools and then they go into the system and then it perpetuates, right? It's a chicken and egg thing. But what we're seeing as a potential is that maybe some of these schools in that region could be supported or can learn from centers of excellences, right?
Okay, let's go for a quick break, Justin. When we return, it's going to be a really fast break, but when we return, let's continue with that because we need to do a speed dating sort of thing. What can we do, etc. We'll be right back here on Agenda. Welcome back to the program agenda. I'm your host, Cito Beltran, and we are joined by Justine Raagas, the Executive Director of PBED, Philippine Business for Education, and we are tackling or having a conversation that spins off from a study generated by the World Bank that points out the serious deficiencies in education systems in the region, and it highlights focuses on the need to support, capacitate, enhance, and incentivize teachers. So, Justin, we're down to about 5, 6 minutes. So let's pick it up with a little speed. Okay, we were talking about capacitating and what can be done, because you keep hearing about lakbay aral, seminars, etc. Are there enough training programs on the ground to fix our problems?
So actually, DepEd had a moratorium on their professional development programs. They actually kind of put a stop to it in March. They said, okay, no more new programs first, because we need to do like a deep dive needs analysis of what exactly are training programs that our teachers need to do. Hopefully that needs analysis has resulted to more, I guess, like a streamlining of the. So to answer your question, there's actually a lot of training programs. However, the question is now, do they actually respond to the current needs?
Yeah, do they even have the time to do it? Because you pointed out earlier, and Gab pointed that out to me before the program. Sir, you have 60 kids, you're teaching all day up to 3 o'clock, you have to do the assessment, the homeworks, etc. Kailan pa sila magte-training?
Yes, they don't have training. They don't have time to do it. That's actually one of the problems, and it's also the quality of the training program. So in many of the conversations we've had, sometimes these training programs are like 500 teachers sitting in one gymnasium talking about one specific topic, when in fact, professional development, like in any sector, should really be catered to, or should really be intentional, right, to really meet the specific need of the teacher. So for example, if a teacher teaches in a setting where there is internet, there are digital, there's equipment, but they're lacking in edtech skills, then maybe that should be the training program for them, right? So what we're hoping that it comes to that, it should come to that. We were hoping to see the results of that needs analysis study that DepEd is doing to streamline the choices of teacher professional development.
But is it actually happening? The streamlining, the deep dive analysis, do you
So
know if it's
it is
happening?
currently happening now, and that's why they kind of put a stop or a moratorium on new training programs, to kind of make sure that it's not just like a menu of so many things that aren't actually needed.
Okay, what about incentives? Because I remember just before COVID, or even after COVID, people were headhunters, HR people were comparing notes, and they said that many people going into companies or jobs are not just looking at the pay scale, they are also looking at learning opportunities and travel opportunities. Apparently, it has become a big deal. Now, for teachers, we said, when will they even have the time to do it? What other ways can they or should they be incentivized? Pera-pera lang ba lagi?
So actually, one of the reasons why also people look at jobs is like their career progression, right? Like what their career will look like in the next few years. So one of the challenges or problems, I guess, in why it's been a bit hard to attract teachers, and at the same time why it's difficult to incentivize teachers, is the problem of career progression in the past. So basically, if you entered as a teacher one, you could progress only if there were items open for higher levels, right? So you could be in that position or in that item for a very long time. You could be a really good teacher, but then you couldn't get promoted because the person on top of you or above you hasn't retired yet. So
So
right,
it's not based on testing,
or
examining.
performance of students, right? You don't progress, you only progress because of the available positions. But the good news is that last year there was an executive order on changing the career progression system. So now it's not really just based on position or on the available positions or available items, but now based on performance, based on how good the teacher is in the classroom, which rightly should be so.
Okay, does politics play a role in evaluation and promotion? Like I know that if the principal doesn't like you or the supervisor, the district supervisor doesn't like you, you're a dead duck. But what about mayors, local government? Do they also play a role in the progression?
So in some of our focus group discussions, they did say like there were some who shared the principals didn't like them, so they kind of had a hard time in their evaluations. But like in any system, there has to be it has to be objective, right? There are metrics, there are ways to measure. Basically, they have a performance and evaluation system. Now, what we're hoping is that it gets used correctly. So it also boils down actually to the importance of school leadership.
Okay.
We need to principals should be like any manager or any CEO. Principals should also be capacitated to make sure that they run their schools administratively, their processes are objective and all that. So
Okay. So as it turns out, we also have to look at the principles. And unfortunately, up until the system changes, someone has to die or retire for others to get promoted. Okay, Justin, thank you very much for your time. It's been a very informative discussion. And of course, given all the revelations you've shared today, there will be several episodes where we will be calling on you to discuss this further here on Agenda. Thank you. God bless
you
you,
so much,
protect
Tito.
you, and give you favor.
Thank you.
Okay, that's Justine Raagas, Executive Director for Philippine Business Education, Philippine Business for Education. Let's go to the blessing for the week, the declaration. Gab? It is from Pope John Paul I. It would be wrong to wait and postpone continually. He who takes the road of later ends up on the road of never. Do not turn life into a perpetual waiting room. And that is such an important reminder. Please think about that. And please, when you pray, please include Team Agenda and our families. And please keep it here on One News. God bless you.